There are many things online that people will not shut up about, and when it comes to anime, Cowboy Bebop is absolutely one of those things. Before I watched Cowboy Bebop, I had heard so many people both in my life and online say, "Dude, Cowboy Bebop," and I'd be like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Then I watched Cowboy Bebop and became one of those people who would, "Dude, Cowboy Bebop." When you watch Cowboy Bebop, the reputation the series carries becomes an undeniable truth. Even if, by the end, you determine it's not really for you, I don't think anybody would honestly say they don't understand why so many others hold it in such a high regard. Cowboy Bebop has a truly unique energy and unorthodox approach to storytelling. The crew are a bunch of broke bounty hunters who need to put food on the table, and it doesn't go much further than that. Instead of being some grandiose space sci-fi epic, the real meat of Cowboy Bebop is through character study. The anime uses its world and bounties the crew takes on to simply put these characters with complex origins in interesting scenarios where their past and development can be explored. Cowboy Bebop constantly offers the viewer new concepts and themes to reflect on, thanks to the cast's varied circumstances as to why they've all ended up on the Bebop and are, well, the way they are. Bebop is deeply existential and never talks down to its audience, but still leaves plenty of room for fun. It's chock full of high-energy action, colorful stories, and jokes, all dressed in a one-of-a-kind style. There are very few other projects that even attempt to do what Cowboy Bebop did, and that speaks to just how special it truly is. Now trust me, I could go on about the anime all day, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Back in 2021, Netflix released their live-action adaptation of Cowboy Bebop, and at the time I tried a bit of the first episode and decided it wasn't for me and moved on. However, recently there's been a bit of a trend going on with Netflix ramping up production on these projects, and that got me thinking about it again. Maybe Netflix Bebop deserves another look. Was it really that bad? The first thing we have to get out of the way with Netflix Bebop is the visual direction the series takes. To put it nicely, confused is the first word that comes to mind. The show is full of bizarre framing. I should have kept a tally count of the amount of Dutch angles in this thing because it's honestly staggering. I really can't stress enough that I am not exaggerating. There are very few pleasant or normal shots in any given episode, so we're constantly jumping from one utterly wild shot to another. They're allergic to keeping the camera straight on, and the show really suffers for it. The only reason I can fathom why this show is shot so strangely is that it's trying to emulate an anime style, but the problem with that is that this style is nowhere to be found in the anime at all. It feels as though they were trying to accomplish this kind of heightened reality energy by taking this direction, but to be blunt, it doesn't work. It's shot like this to feel different, but these insane angles lack any kind of intent behind them. I'm not saying you can't have these kind of shots present in your show, but when nearly every shot is like this, they mean nothing and only accomplish giving the viewer whiplash. Here's a great example. That clip was just establishing a location, paired with those visuals, and the rest of the scene carries out the same way. The entire show is like that. I didn't even cherry pick that as a particularly bad example. I promise, I'm not joking, that is the baseline. Now, just for fun, here's what happens when the show intentionally tries to do crazy visuals. So we're starting off with a rough foundation here. At the very least, the show is difficult to follow and unpleasant to watch due to this creative direction, and when it comes to the rest of the visual aspects, there isn't much improvement. The grading in the show is iffy as well. There's a sort of washed out grayness over top of everything. Quick note, I've done some deep digging and it's very hard to find any kind of raw footage or pictures from the production of the show. There's very little behind the scenes for Netflix Bebop in general, but I did find one singular leaked set photo that I think helps my point here. I spent way too long tracking down old business addresses, but I found the exact scene they were shooting. See just how intense the neon is here, and pay close attention to how vibrant Spike's jacket is under that lighting. Now, in the final product, notice only the highlights are neon purple, and look at Spike's jacket. Of course, the lighting was pretty intense on set and was going to be pulled back to a degree, but what we ended up with is shockingly more dull. The colors captured in camera seemed closer in spirit to the source material, but were toned down to be far more muted in post. It's disappointing considering the anime's warm, dynamic, and fun colors, especially since it seems that they were most likely trying to go for that in the show. Even if they ended up doing a cyberpunk type grade as a middle ground between style and realism, I think something like that would have been much better than gray and gritty. The premise for the show requires a lot of VFX, and for the most part, I'd say they're fine. Important pieces such as the Bebop or the Swordfish are on model, and you can see from the photo comparison I just did that Netflix Bebop does have plenty of unnoticeable realism CGI over sets. Nearly everything looks about as good as your average Netflix show. However, there are also moments like this. Sometimes the show utilizes VFX in a way I could only describe as rocket jump energy, and that's no disrespect to rocket jump. VGHS still bangs, and I rewatch it embarrassingly frequently. It's just that early YouTube badass epic action FX vibe pops up a lot in this show. It can't help but be so indulgent in these goofy action VFX moments that it's unintentionally hilarious. Again, the work is not necessarily bad, it's more like every episode had a couple $1 million explosion budget that just had to be spent. Speaking of action, the action sequences in the original anime are frankly flawless and hands down one of its most frequent points of praise. Spike's martial arts are directly inspired by Bruce Lee's, and the anime makes no secret of this.
Be formless, shapeless, like water.
I'm telling you, don't tense up. It's not about strength or power. You gotta be fluid. You have to be like water.
That inspiration leads to iconic fight scenes with gorgeous choreography brought to life through fantastic, fluid animation and excellent cinematography. There is a wealth of beautiful fight scenes in the anime for the show to pull from, and unfortunately, the action in Netflix Bebop is not anything close. Looking at both versions' first episodes, they both take an opportunity to show off Spike's signature style. In the anime, the first time we see Spike fight is when he's pursuing his bounty Asimov, and the animators did not hold back. The scene plays out almost like a dance with its smooth choreography. It's a killer introduction to Spike's style, leaving a lasting impression on the viewer and informing us of his character's cool demeanor with the way he's clearly loving the interaction. It sets a very high standard that the anime delivers on throughout the entire show. In Netflix Bebop, the first time we see Spike fight is straight off the top, the very first scene. Between almost every hit, there's a cut. There's random slow motion sprinkled in everywhere. Some choreography here is just silly. And, of course, guns quickly come into play. Jet also shows up halfway through, diverting a bit of attention from Spike's grand intro, and the fight ends early due to a hostage situation gone awry, quickly killing the adrenaline of the scene. All of that said, Spike's attitude during the entire altercation is on brand with that playful smarminess, something that's not given much space to shine within the series or when attempted, falls flat.
Nice.
Unfortunately, the issues in this scene are set in stone for the rest of Netflix Bebop, and it only goes downhill from here. The formula of 1 or 2 hits and then a cut is inescapable, and it severely takes away from the weight, fluidity, realism, and fun found in the source material. Since they can't stay away from those crazy angles, it's hard to tell exactly what's happening sometimes, which is directly opposite of the anime's very clear showcasing of its action scenes. The fight-to-gunfight transition is also unfortunately a trend in the show, along with random slow motion being used generously in any given fight, both of which impact the pace and energy of the action. Real quick, just because I know YouTube comments is going to get mad if I don't mention it, there is a singular one-take action sequence with hidden cuts. All my criticisms so far are invalid. I'm self-reporting. It's from one of the worst episodes in the show and is fully an epic bullet fest moment that feels 100 times more John Wick than Cowboy Bebop, but hey, it does exist. Anyways, in the grand scheme of things, taking a miss this huge on the action is devastating for the series. It completely strips itself of a large portion of the source material's identity, and out of everything on a presentation level was something there was no excuse not to nail. Hey Jet, did you know a lot of people that watch GhoulFMV on YouTube aren't actually subscribed to his channel? Pretty lame, right? Yeah, It really helps the channel out if you subscribe. Anyways, I'll see you around. Before I get into talking about the live-action versions of these characters, I need to make something very clear. Criticisms I have about characterization on this show have nothing to do with any actor portraying that character. Actors were hired to play the version of the character that the series was going for and have very little influence over the direction any given show they're a part of takes. Do not use anything I've said or will say in this video to harass or bother anybody involved in the production of this show. Many cooks are in the kitchen with any large-scale creative project like this, and holding a single person accountable for things out of their control is beyond unfair. Sadly, people who were a part of making this show have already been targeted by a loud group of terminally online folks, and I don't want any part of it. With that said, let's take a look. The easiest way I can sum up Spike in this show is that he's about half the character he was in the anime. Netflix Bebop takes Spike's devil-may-care attitude and pushes more towards a colder, stoic area in their depiction, allowing brief glimpses of his anime counterpart's wit and charm to poke out but never stick around for too long. An element of Spike in the anime that I find to be one of the most important aspects of his personality is his general goofiness. He'll crack jokes, make silly faces, and is pretty cheeky.
Same with a snake.
You two make a lovely couple.
It adds a layer of complexity to him. Considering his circumstances in life, he uses this layer of humor with his couldn't care less attitude and aversion to talking about his history in general to enforce that wall between living in his past mentally while outwardly being in the present.
Look at my eyes, Faye. One of them is a fake because I lost it in an accident. I've been seeing the past in one eye and the present in the other. So I thought I could only see patches of reality, never the whole picture. I felt like I was watching a dream I'd never wake up from.
It sincerely humanizes him and endears him to both the audience as well as the characters around him. Importantly, it makes the moments where Spike does explore his past much more impactful when we as the audience get to see just how much this silly guy who never gives a damn does, in fact, give many damns. I find Netflix Spike almost entirely ignores this important aspect of the character and more so pulls from anime Spike's slick/badass traits over emotional ones. Netflix Spike goes for the trope of stone cold and uncaring cool guy, TM. Notice I use uncaring because it's not in the way of anime Spike's relaxed, whatever happens, happens attitude, but in the boring way of he's too cool to express a wide variety of emotions and sometimes comes off like a dick.
Was your goddamn fault. I needed you and you weren't there.
Look, I'm sorry about your face and all right? The good news is your hunch was right, so unless you died and I didn't notice, how about we move on, huh?
You lied. I brought you on my goddamn ship in my home. And you played me.
I always did have my suspicions.
Spike.
Okay.
You know I can count on my one good hand how many times I've seen Kimmy in the last 7 years? And after all the groveling I did with Alyssa to get her to agree to me coming by, I show up empty-handed?
Good news. I think you can give Kimmy this one.
What we end up with is a character that's not nearly as likable, feels far less human than his animated counterpart, and shows his baggage more on the outside despite still not wanting to talk about any of it. He's sick as hell, yeah, but I can't care about anything going on with him because I'm only told to care about his deal. I'm not genuinely invested in him whatsoever. On rare occasions, he'll get moments where he's allowed to be expressive.
I already lost you once. I'm not losing you again.
I wish things were different.
And nothing's changed between us. It's just lost time, that's all.
Only for the show to move on and have Spike go back to being Mr. Cool once more.
Those goggle things. What'd you see in there anyway?
I don't remember.
What's really wild is that this fundamental misunderstanding of his character is directly confirmed to be their intention with Spike. In an interview, one of the producers said this about Spike. A writer and I wrote this on a note card and tacked it up to our whiteboard in the room. His motto for Spike Spiegel was always, Spike Spiegel is super fucking cool. Then going on to say, is he tortured? Yes. Does he have a lot of tragedy in his backstory? Yes. Is he somebody who's not the most sort of effusive with his emotions kind of guy? Yes. You know this. But he's super fucking cool. So I think more than anything else, Spiegel's super fucking cool. At the end of the day, the crux of Cowboy Bebop is character exploration and development. By going this direction with the main character, it's already over, dude. Pack it up. We tried, I guess. If we're talking about Spike, we gotta talk about both Vicious and Julia. In the anime, Vicious is in a total of 5 episodes, technically 3 if we count 2-parters as 1 episode. Going by that same logic, Julia is in 2.5 episodes. Both of them aren't so much fully fledged characters and more forces, figures from Spike's past that still haunt him. In the anime, Vicious is a stoic, highly capable, and methodically evil villain with a deep hatred for Spike. He works so effectively as Spike's rival because the two mirror each other so closely. Both are utterly consumed by their past internally and closely matched in their skill sets. Vicious uses his demons to fuel his rage, becoming a powerful sociopathic threat to be feared across the galaxy. Spike goes the opposite way, approaching the present in a nonchalant manner and living by just going through the motions, of course until the past comes up again and he can't help but attempt to heal old wounds. In Netflix Bebop, Vicious gets promoted from his anime counterpart's mysterious, force-like self to main antagonist, appearing in every single episode of the series. His personality undergoes a complete 180, going from an ice-cold, intelligent force to be reckoned with to a belligerent, unstable, and childish fool.
You will never be man enough to stand up for yourself.
Don't you ever tell me I'm not man.
I'll kill that bitch.
In nearly every scene he's in, he's flying off the handle, or losing his temper, and throwing a blood-soaked tantrum. He has no presence or intrigue about him at all. He's just an insane psychopath who cries when he doesn't get his way. Despite being in every episode, his entire personality doesn't go much deeper than that. He is a textbook crazy villain that further guts the show of meaningful character exploration. There's nothing to connect with in his character, not even as the other side of the same coin to Spike, because that dynamic doesn't exist in this adaptation. They're not mirroring each other, they are polar opposites, and their interactions hold no weight because Vicious is so hyperbolically evil and insane that there isn't anything to ground the viewer.
Fearless, he had it all. Ruthless, level-headed, and a better killer than you'll ever be.
Fuck! Fearless.
There is no method to his madness here. Vicious only serves as a spectacle of gratuitous villainy who had me slamming my head into the table every scene he was in because I couldn't stand how ridiculous this take on the character is. Just like Vicious, Julia also appears in every episode of the Netflix series. In the anime, even more mystique surrounds her character. She mostly fills the role of an overarching theme for Spike. She represents a lost/forbidden love, the effects of which largely shape Spike into who he is. Moments with Julia are very brief, almost as if she's a ghost, and that aspect of her presence in the original is why it works so effectively. We do not know very much about Julia or her complicated relationship with Spike. All we can see is the impact of it on him. The anime imprints through a very small amount of flashbacks how the relationship was a flame that burned so brightly for Spike that it will never leave him, despite these moments being very, and I emphasize, very vague. So, since Netflix opted to have Julia appear in every episode, they essentially had to create an entire character for her. But here's the crazy thing. They, didn't. For most of the entire show, Julia is just Vicious's girlfriend. It's hard to get into because I want to save the plot of the show for when I'm done talking about the characters, but all I can really think of for Julia is stuff she does in the story, if that makes sense. She's pretty docile for most of the present day stuff, going along with Vicious's craziness for her own safety, and then when they get into flashback territory, they still don't showcase much of her personality. Maybe it was an intentional choice to keep her personality shrouded in mystery, but it's really strange because she's, there all the time. The whole thing they did with her in the anime, a character representing a theme, only worked so well because of her ghost-like presence. When we see her every single episode and all her conversations center around her boyfriend, there's nothing for the audience to grab onto. Their approach doesn't work.
Look through it. we always do, to arrange a sit-down with her and Vicious.
He's alive, so he's just out there. Did he ask about me? I could have gone to him. That I should leave Vicious? Hey, is he okay?
You're the only one who knows why Vicious really tried to kill Fearless.
What they did with her is just really weird. I have a hard time wrapping my head around why it was decided to make her a main character in the show, but not giving the character any space to really be anything beyond just pushing the narrative in different directions. Jet is an interesting case for Netflix Bebop. He easily wins the Best Adapted Character award, aside from Ein, but is also left being the most underutilized character, once again, aside from Ein.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
His signature traits from the anime are almost all here and accounted for. He keeps his hard exterior but warm interior to those around him, although he still needs to keep them in line, and also upholds his strong morals. He has the most accurate and enjoyable interactions with the other characters in the series, especially when he's with Spike.
So did you two really...
Spike.
Okay. Seriously, though.
Spike, keep your eye on the ball.
Hey, I'm not Woodcock, pal. Okay?
Sometimes when you lose something, there's just no getting it back.
Any more fortune cookies you want to crack open, or can we eat now?
You work at being an asshole?
No, actually, it comes naturally, unlike your arm.
Eat your damn peppers.
All in all, he's a character the show gets pretty close to the source material. The only trap it falls into sometimes is balancing Jet being frustrated with the other characters and being outright angry with them.
Now this is my ship, and as long as you're on it, we're gonna go after the bounties I say we go after.
But thankfully, these moments are infrequent. When Jet is given time to shine, we get some great stuff. A new addition to his character is having a kid with a wife he's separated from, and there's two cute subplots surrounding it that are really heartwarming and very Jet Black. It's fun to see him in full dad mode, considering he functions a bit like one for his Bebop found family.
Why are we here?
Because it's family time. And during family time, we do fun things together. Like bowl.
What is happening?
Well, after recent events, we wanted to do something special for you.
Throughout the show, Jet is mostly assigned to being around for the plot while not giving large contributions or showing up to either witness or participate at the end of scenarios. I don't know, maybe it's just because I liked him the most out of all the characters, but there are plenty of scenes that you can feel him missing from, and overall, I would have enjoyed seeing this version of Jet get some more screen time, especially since he gives us some of the best stuff this entire show has to offer. Faye is another character that Netflix Bebop takes a large amount of creative liberty with. She's a different character entirely, with loose threads tying back to her anime version. In the anime, Faye is a devilishly clever, deeply flawed, and capable master manipulator. At first, she's only really motivated by her own self-interest and pretty standoffish towards the Bebop crew. It takes her some time to click with everyone, and she grows to genuinely care about them. The reason for her initial behavior is due to the objective horror of her backstory, the effects of which cause her to adapt, developing her sly manipulative ways, combat skills, and cons out of necessity to survive. Due to her extensive trauma, she also developed a very firm wall emotionally, and putting trust in others or having any kind of relationship is near impossible to her. Her character is very grounded, with her flaws, self-destructive behavior, and coping mechanisms being completely explained by her circumstances. She easily has my second favorite backstory, and her development is just as complex as Spike's, maybe even more dynamic. In sharp contrast, Netflix Faye is an incredibly unserious caricature. She's been assigned to the role of the funny. She exclusively speaks in swear words, and is mostly around to drop horribly painful jokes.
Jet Black, meet Faye Valentine.
Hey, fuck you!
It sounds like chicken shit to me, 'cause me, I backed him solo, and I'm like a little girl.
You know what you need?
Less noise?
The big nature's cure. Speak from experience, recent experience.
There are very few scenes with her in this entire show that don't have her bombarding the viewer with random unfunny swearing or slipping something dirty into a conversation. Even emotional moments are not immune to this. Remember the scene where Jet and Spike surprise her with a new birthday? This is her reaction.
But we decided to make today your new birthday.
Wow. You two are the sweetest dickheads a girl could ever want.
I'm bringing this up off the top here because it's her most defining character trait in the show and largely influenced how much I was able to get out of her character. She is like that for the entire length of this series. I spent a lot of time talking about the anime version of Faye because so much of her isn't utilized for this adaptation that she hardly resembles herself. She pulls, as far as I can tell, one singular con and it's forced onto her without warning.
Girl, saw my car, please.
Ticket?
Of course, I have it. Oh, right, I gave it to you, darling heart.
What? No, you didn't.
She's more open emotionally, settling in with Spike and Jet without as much resistance, and even has a romantic fling in which she exposition dumps her entire backstory. Not to get into her backstory, but big surprise, it's different and very trimmed down. Even if it was given the proper treatment and stayed a little closer to source, it wouldn't have had a fraction of the impact anyways. Since she is wholly defined by being consistently crass and grating without reprieve, any efforts at developing her character felt meaningless. This attempt at an adaptation of Faye is an utter failure, and I can't put into words how large of a disservice it is to her character. The only positive I can think of is that she's not given a ton of focus. Ed is in this show for around 1 minute, and that is the best outcome possible.
Yes, you are. You're Spike, cowboy, bounty hunter for hire. Wake up! I have a job.
Netflix Bebop takes a different approach to storytelling from the anime. Instead of mostly consisting of one-off stories that are used to explore and develop the main cast, every episode of Netflix Bebop loosely adapts one from the anime while a brand new story is happening with Vicious, Julia, and the Red Dragon Syndicate. The attempts at character study within the Bebop crew that are offered may as well be non-existent due to the disconnect the audience has with them, with that divide being attributed to the lack of substance and quality found in their characters. Because of this, the Vicious setup ends up being the only aspect of this adaptation with any semblance of focus, unfolding over the season. Vicious's deal, and thus the through line of the show, is his plot to pull off a coup and become the head of the syndicate while killing Spike along the way. The story here is of equal quality to everything else we've talked about so far. I've already established that Vicious suffers from the same issues found in all the other characters, and on top of that, it's difficult to tolerate him being on screen. So, we are left with a completely hollow narrative. As a compromise on the structure of the anime, bounties for the Bebop crew take place alongside this plot as sort of half self-contained stories. I say half self-contained as they'll often tie back into the new stuff going on in one way or another. As an example, the first bounty Jet and Spike take on in the anime, Asimov, is on the run from a crime syndicate he was a part of. He's selling stolen red-eye, a combat ability-enhancing drug, to get the funds he needs to be able to run away and start a fresh, crime-free life with his partner Katarina. In the live action, most of that is the same, except the crime syndicate Asimov is trying to escape from is instead now the Red Dragon Syndicate. The show uses that change to introduce Vicious, as he is a high-ranking member of the syndicate, and is also how he learns Spike is still alive. Another quick example is that Mad Piero is directly hired by Vicious to kill Spike, instead of Spike just happening to run into him. There are plenty more ways in which those two aspects intertwine with one another, but I think those two examples are enough to get my point across. There's a very noticeable tonal inconsistency between the two elements, with the Bebop sections being these wacky adventures, and then it just hard cuts to the overly gritty Vicious story that feels like it's another show entirely, further affecting the overall viewing experience. As for the story, I didn't care for it whatsoever. It's just Vicious having boring conversations about syndicate politics with the elders, Vicious conspiring with other random criminals, Vicious villain monologuing about what he deserves, and Vicious losing his mind for the sake of something happening. Sometimes Vicious tries to indirectly kill Spike, and sometimes Spike tries to kill Vicious, also while avoiding direct confrontation. We get to see Julia struggle with her unhealthy relationship, all while she's not given a personality to make that dynamic interesting or allowed to exist as much of an individual, even though she's always around. They do a flashback episode right before the finale to try to tie everything together with Spike and reach some kind of payoff, but it does nothing to remedy any of the existing issues with these characters. Spike Spike in the Syndicate is the exact same as himself present day. Same exact situation with Vicious and Julia. Vicious is still a completely unhinged psychopath, and Julia is still just there. We don't even leave with a better understanding of why she was ever with Vicious in the first place, and the episode shows us all the way from them meeting to them getting together. It simply happens. Hilariously, the big twist finale undoes nearly the entire story in about the course of 2 minutes anyways. Vicious finally gets what he wants. He kills all of the Syndicate elders, including his own dad, and becomes the new leader. Then they try to end the season on an adaptation of the iconic Ballad of Fallen Angels session, having Vicious finishing up his to-do list and trying to kill Spike in the cathedral, until Julia shows up and shoots Vicious, knocking him down. This twist is just wild. Julia flips multiple times within the few minutes that this all plays out. At first, she's like, Spike, why did you leave me trapped with Vicious? Then Vicious tells her that he told Spike Julia chose him. And then she offers to run the evil Syndicate together with Spike, and he refuses, so she decides to just kill him instead, shooting him out the window. After, she locks Vicious in some cellar and tells him that she is the head of the Syndicate and he is going to act as her mouthpiece. Yeah, so Julia's just evil now, I guess. I'm not kidding. That was the plan for season 2. Oh, and also, it's pure comedy to go the straight narrative route with this adaptation, only to flip it on its head with a twist so out of the blue that it's borderline nonsensical and makes the entire approach worse retroactively. One of the most glaring problems Netflix Bebop has is that it treats their audience like children. It feels the need to stare into the camera and directly tell the audience exactly what they're saying if there's even a slight chance someone watching might have a question. Subtext is removed from the equation completely, and having any sort of mystery or concept that isn't painstakingly deconstructed to the viewer is like illegal or something. In episode 5, there's a moment in which Julia pieces together that Spike is still alive from how the other characters around her have been behaving. It's initially an interesting sequence that could be a great opportunity to show the audience what that revelation means to her through imagery alone. Instead, they show her clearly uncovering this information through flashbacks and decide it's necessary to end the segment on her saying out loud,
Fearless is alive.
By the way, yes, Spike's old name in the Syndicate was Fearless. It couldn't be unknown information to the audience because then an imaginary guy might have been confused. And yes, Fearless is legitimately the name they landed on. The series will frequently do this, communicate information to the audience only for it to be repeated by a character, and every single time it's ridiculous. Emotion-focused developments are treated in the same way. As a result, they ring empty because we're always directly told what the characters are feeling and in turn how we should feel. There is no room for interpretation. Netflix Bebop puts zero trust in the audience to think for themselves or apparently comprehend what's happening on screen. Faye has to exposition dump her backstory and all the various ways that it affects her the first time it's brought up, or else people watching might have to actively engage with the material, and we can't have that. That's really hard. Vicious can't want to execute a coup in the Syndicate for the sake of power. It has to be because of daddy issues, because why else would the main villain want to be powerful? It doesn't make any sense. I think it's a part of the reason they felt the need to add a through line to their version and attempt to flesh out Julia and Vicious's characters. It's as if there was some kind of fear that if Netflix Bebop was built off of self-contained episodes and was fully character-focused, that people watching wouldn't get it or something, despite the anime's reputation being certifiable proof that wouldn't be the case. Everything adds together to form a tonally confused mess of a story devoid of substance. It's the antithesis of Cowboy Bebop. It offers the viewer nothing. There's no well-executed further development of the world or characters of Cowboy Bebop, and it utterly fails at transitioning the structure of the source material, not even being able to offer a worthwhile story. It's impossible to carry the weight of something that is weightless. A fact demonstrated through and through with this adaptation. To be blunt, with Netflix live-action Cowboy Bebop, there is nothing here. It's not worth watching if you're a fan, it's not worth watching if you're unfamiliar with the anime, and it's not even worth watching to laugh at. It's 10 nearly hour-long episodes of nothing. I kept trying to figure out why this project exists, aside from the obvious play of making money off of a recognizable IP, and there's no answer to that question. Netflix Bebop had no intention. It doesn't have anything meaningful to add to Cowboy Bebop's legacy and showcases a very poor understanding of its source material. It doesn't seem to have any respect for the anime or the series creator Shinichiro Watanabe's vision. Watanabe is credited on the adaptation as a creative consultant, but when asked about the extent of his contributions, he had this to say. I read the initial concept and provided my opinions, but I'm not sure if they will be reflected in the final product. I have no choice but to pray and hope that it will turn out good. I don't have any right to stop it. Those rights are in the hands of Sunrise. So if you have a complaint, please send it to them. Call me crazy, but I think if Netflix Bebop earnestly wanted to create a proper adaptation, perhaps they would have kept Watanabe a little closer to the production of the show. But here we are. Netflix Bebop is nearly as long as the entire anime, despite only covering 10 episodes, so at that point, there is literally no reason for somebody interested in Cowboy Bebop to watch it. It only exists as a staggeringly inferior version of the original, that only 3 years later, nobody talks about anymore. To be clear, a one-to-one adaptation would have had very little value as well. I think the best approach possible would be to utilize the characters and concepts of Cowboy Bebop to tell new, original, self-contained stories, primarily focusing on character study, maybe adapting an episode of the anime every once in a while. That, to me, would feel far more in line with Cowboy Bebop instead of the more narrative-focused final product. Regardless of what I think, this is what we got, and it's not worth anybody's time in the slightest. This video took a long time to get finished, and part of the reason why is that Netflix Bebop is very difficult to get through, even if you separate it from the anime, being poorly paced, visually miserable, and providing nothing of interest with its characters and story. It's not a good show on its own merit, and it's certainly not Cowboy Bebop. With that said, I want to cover a couple things I did enjoy in Netflix Bebop that I didn't find an opportunity to mention earlier. A genuine gift the show gives us is the return of Yoko Kanno and Seatbelts for another entire record of Cowboy Bebop's signature musical style. Updated tracks from the anime are here, as well as brand new compositions, and they're fantastic. I wish I could use it for this video, but I'll get obliterated by copyright. The soundtrack does a lot of heavy lifting to help the show feel more in line with its identity, on top of just being a killer album. Some sets built for this show are really impressive and are right at home in the Cowboy Bebop universe. The Bebop looks great, so does Anna's Cabaret, a new location, and some of the street sets are also dressed up really nicely. These elements were very appreciated during my viewing experience, but still, I can't recommend watching the show for them. Definitely listen to the soundtrack though, it really is great. Overall, Netflix live-action adaptation of Cowboy Bebop fails to utilize almost everything from the anime that gave it such an untouchable reputation. It also fails at being a cohesive or enjoyable show without any comparison to the original. I'll say it one more time because it's the most fitting way to summarize the project. It is nothing. To end the video, I want to leave you with series creator Shinichiro Watanabe's reaction to the live-action series. For the new Netflix live-action adaptation, they sent me a video to review and check. It started with a scene in a casino, which made it very tough for me to continue. I stopped there, and so only saw that opening scene. It was clearly not Cowboy Bebop, and I realized at that point that if I wasn't involved, it would not be Cowboy Bebop. I felt that maybe I should have done this. Although, the value of the original anime is somehow far higher now. Hey, thanks for watching to the end of the video. Since you're still around, why don't you carry the weight of that subscribe button, right? If you've been watching my channel for a bit, I'm sure you've noticed upload gap. I'm sorry. Starting now, I will be getting something out at least once a month, and that is a Ghoul guarantee. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed my ramblings on Netflix Bebop. It nearly broke me. If you want to keep up to date on me, you can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky as @GhoulFMV. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to file your taxes. Love ya.